You joined us for Rain of Blood, and together we made it rain bigger and better than we could have ever imagined. So now, join us for a second blazing inferno of knowledge and exploration. You're listening to Rain of Fyre, the scorching sequel event to Rain of Blood, where we're going to delve into the world of fire play education and safety as we prepare for the upcoming Rain of Fyre event. Join your host, Miss Kitten, Radically Dark, and Ember Solaris as we ignite your curiosity and stoke the flames of passion with discussions, interviews, and authentic insights from around the globe. Together, we're three flames united in one mission to make quality kink education more accessible and open pathways to conversation and connection about edgeplay topics around the world. But before we dive into these sizzling topics, a content warning. Rain of Fyre discusses mature themes, explicit content, and practices related to BDSM and fire play. So listener discretion is advised, and this is an adult-only podcast. Other topics may include mental health, trauma, consent, and more. So please be sure you're in a good spot to engage in these topics before continuing to listen. So, grab your fire gear, stoke the flames of curiosity, and let's embark on this crackling journey together. Welcome to Rain of Fyre.
Hey, fire starters, and welcome back to my dungeon. I have Prussian from Houston, and I'm very excited to speak to this incredible human who is not only a fire player, but also a blood lover. So this really ticks all the kitten boxes tonight, and I just want to welcome this awesome player to the dungeon and to the podcast. Thank you so much for joining us, sir.
Oh, thank you. I'm looking forward to it. The conversation that we've had so far, I think it's gonna be great. I'm really excited.
The little girl from South Africa is always excited to speak to these fire guys from Texas. So you like all the American movies. These really cool guys from Texas. So a little bit fangirling, and I'm very excited to chat to you. Before we go into the in-depth stuff, how did you start in kink? What was your journey like, and how did you go from being a vanilla muggle to being to having a dark soul and playing with all these very cool kinky things?
It can be a little bit of a long story, but I'll try to give you the highlights of it. I was in the United States Army, and I had to attend certain different trainings, specifically geared around withstanding or escaping and evading capture, and through those experiences, namely waterboarding was one of them. Whenever after that training, I then realized, I kind of liked that. So I ended up, I'm a bisexual man. I ended up finding an online community, and that led me to FetLife, where I then attended my first local munch right there outside the military base at a group called Touch of Leather. From that first munch, I met the leader of that group, and she invited me out to a party. But when she came by the table, she said something, and I'm pretty much a smartass. I am quick-witted. I'm pretty quick on teasing and just having fun like that. And so as she walked away, the people at my table said, "You don't want to mess with her. She's vicious." And to me, that was a challenge. So at the following party that following week, she was sitting there collecting money for tickets, and I just walked up to her and I go, "So I hear you're vicious." And from there, we had a scene that night, and I didn't leave for the next 3 years. She ended up becoming her slave. We went all around the country. She was extremely involved, had over 40 years of experience at the time. I basically jumped in head first, was in a polyamorous leather house from pretty much day one. We attended several national conferences. She taught. We hosted parties there at the house, had our own dungeon as well. It was a crazy experience for the first 3 years. And from there, I just grew and went into fire and blood and all sorts of other wonderful dark things. Leather, I'm actually about to run here in about 20 days, I'm actually running for my first title here in the here in the Texas area for the Heartland Person of Leather contest at Gwen Bash at the end of this month. So I'm in it, and I teach all over the place and have a lot of fun. It's pretty great.
Okay, so I'm going to ask you the novice questions first. What is a leather title? What does it mean? And how do you get involved in something like that? And what do you do when you get the title? What does it mean to get it?
Okay, so a leather title. The leather organization is I wouldn't say it's an organization. It's a community within the BDSM community, and it came out of gay men returning from World War II and the United States. At the time in the United States, it was illegal to be a homosexual, but they still wanted to have the camaraderie that they had whenever they were in the military. Very similar to how we kind of view biker clubs in the United States as well. Like if you've ever seen Sons of Anarchy or anything like that, it's a horrible example of a biker club, but it kind of gives you that idea. They were outlaws. And around that time, there was a movie that came out that was it's called The Wild Ones with Marlon Brando. And a lot of men identified with that. It's kind of it was the counter to the vaudeville idea of what homosexuality was, where as far as vaudeville was very like fairies and sissies and prancy and not very effeminate style men. These were much more butch, manly, muscle bound, bearded, tatted up, scary dudes that were also happened to be gay. And so they kind of took on that ideal of the motorcycle culture, dressed all in leather type situation. And from there, it grew. It grew through all sorts of different means to where, especially in the United States, we had title contests, which were more of a kind of like a beauty pageant at first is really kind of the best way to do it. A lot of them were for covers of magazines. And then they have since grown into a vast network of systems and vast network of titles that span from gay Leathermen all the way through the LGBTQA plus, all the way through it, and different relationship styles as well. Like there's even there's master slave titles, there's just power exchange titles, there's bar titles, there's education titles, all those things. And they're basically just a competition, friendly competition within the community that then you get a patch, you get a sash, and you represent an area. Now there are international titles as well. And some of these are like feeder contests. The one that I am actually competing for is Heartland Person of Leather, and it basically represents the middle of the United States. So Texas, Oklahoma, Missouri, going all the way up through the Dakotas. If I do win this title, I will then go to the international title contest, which is held in March at South Plains Leather Fest. And that is for the international Person of Leather contest. And that one can basically be anywhere in the anywhere in the world. We've had several international master slave contests that also happens at South Plains Leather Fest. And there's been several of those people who have taught in the UK. I think even some have gone to Australia. It's not really international in that we have representation from the entire world, but we are able to go outside of the United States. So yeah, that's the title system kind of in short is that it's basically just friendly competitions that you represent an area, you then go and attend different conferences, you teach, or you just show up and you volunteer. You're just there to be a face, if that makes sense, to represent what those values are for that contest. For Heartland, it is what our leather values are. You are representing that area and helping in that area, and even outside of it if you want to, but education, volunteering, it's a service title. So it's about being of service to your community.
I love that. I think that's super cool. Little bit American that it's international. I love that because
Yeah.
it's the American international competition. I'm having a big laugh because I saw America is now playing cricket. I also saw that America's cricket team is mostly from Pakistan. So I did have to have a bit of a smile and say congratulations on the international sport, guys, and for picking such an international team.
We're good at that. We did that with basketball, where we had, especially as I'm a fan of the Spurs, and we had Manu Ginobili, who's from Spain. We had who else? We had a couple of people that were from overseas, and but yet they're playing on the American team in the Olympics. I'm like, okay, yeah, that's.
Yeah, I just had a smile. Anyway, you guys won yesterday, so I will give you that. Well done. You beat Pakistan with their own players, which I thought I would.
I was like, we actually have a cricket team. Okay, cool. It was at the World Cup, right? Like the World Cup for cricket.
I want to say yes. I'm a real girl when it comes to that. I just saw the headline that America had the American cricket team had beaten Pakistan, and then I had to Google it and realize that most of the team was from Pakistan. So you took their best players and beat them with them, which I mean, it's all fair in love and war, and the players get to play, and I think it's great that men get to throw balls around and enjoy themselves on a Saturday.
Yeah.
I'm all for tossing balls, so good for you. But I do love the American version of international. It's an international title, but I think that's great, and I think it's really amazing that there's a bit of legacy, and that really connects with me. And I love the fact that then that you become you give back with the service, which I think is so important, and I think communities need so much. So yeah, wishing you best of luck. If it helps, you can have my international vote. I don't know how I would give it to you, but I'll give you my international vote, 100%.
For sure.
Your journey sounded amazing.
Regional though, so we're okay.
Your journey sounded amazing and so much fun. I think we're all a little jealous listening to that, especially when you talk about going to cons, and we have a dungeon at home. We just don't have the big cons and stuff that we can attend, but we live vicariously through you. We will be watching your title progress, but your journey with fire and how you came to be involved in it and what you find in it and why it captivates you.
I've always kind of considered myself a hedonist and a very primal type person, and I love messing with the primal fears. And fire is definitely a primal fear. It's one of the first things that we're taught as children. Don't touch that; it's hot. And that type of aspect, and the being burned type aspect, and providing light in the darkness. All of those things are very primal. And I feel like we get really into our lizard brain, as we would call it in the States, for our fear of it. And it's such a natural force that it's kind of crazy what happens with fire. And so whenever we try to play with it, it's almost an oxymoron in that you're playing with something that you really shouldn't play with, because it's dangerous. It's extremely dangerous. And so my love for it has been more of I don't think that there will ever be a fire master type thing. Like, you can't control fire unless we're like superheroes on a movie screen. But being able to manipulate it and being able to use it to cause pain, pleasure, get really great reactions, watch things, flash and burn is always highly entertaining to me. Maybe I'm a little bit of a pyromaniac, I'm not sure, but it's something that's always been really interesting to me. And one of the big things that I recently, or not recently, I've been doing it for a while, but from the Polynesian cultures, fire dancing. That was one of the first things that I ever witnessed as far as like fire play and playing with it, doing poi. And I love doing that. The heat, the sound, the just motion of it. It's just gorgeous. And it's extremely gratifying to have that.
I love your mention of the sound of fire. Like the one thing that it just absolutely, it just like it really hits the right spot in my soul is that whoosh of that whatever item you've got traveling through the air. I don't have much experience with it other than with a fire whip, but that noise of the whip, it's literally like the closest an African girl is gonna get to a lightsaber. Like it's super cool. It's like the African version, completely dangerous, completely unstable. But it makes that special effect noise and the feeling of the drag when the impact item is carrying fire and carrying fuel. Just that heaviness and the sound and it's so fucking hot. It's like it's super sexy. Like there's something very primal about it that just stirs my soul as well. Can you tell me a little bit about, so the fire poi is beautiful and the fire dancing and all of that stuff is beautiful, but we don't often get to talk to guys who played with fire and used it for pain.
Yes.
And that really ticks my sadist box. So maybe some examples and just a little bit about your journey with pain and fire.
For sure. So I started out with tabletop fire, which is what I would consider the normal way of doing fire play. You have the bottom laying on the table, and you're using alcohol, 70%, 90%, 50% isopropyl alcohol, and then using wands or flash cotton or mousse. White rain mousse is something that a lot of people really enjoy because it's very low temp and it's kind of pretty. But where I started out doing all of that, including cupping, and I taught a lot of 101 classes, and really what ended up happening, excuse the pun, but I got burnt out. It's a good way of putting it. I got burnt out of doing the same thing over and over and over again with fire. It's an awesome thing to see people's faces light up and enjoy, just the sensation and, getting a little bit of heat. But I wanted to push the envelope, which is just kind of my way that I am. I'm a big extreme edge player. But I wanted to push that envelope to a new level that a lot of people found could be scary. And that's using fire for pain. One of the main things that you end up getting told a lot whenever you're first starting fire, and it's absolutely valid, 100%, you should listen to it. You don't do extended burns, which what an extended burn is where you leave the fire on the bottom for an extended period of time. And by extended period of time, I mean more than like 3 seconds. If you're leaving it longer than 3 seconds, really even longer than maybe a second or two, you're going to end up burning them. I will leave an extended burn on somebody for 5-10 seconds. To where that they are really experiencing that sensation of pain. Now, my entire job during that is to limit the burn. It's a very big balancing act, and it requires a lot of personal responsibility and a lot of experience to do it. But one of my favorite things, one of the best places to do it, I have found, as far as where you can kind of get a repeated regular result, is on the back. It's where a lot of fire play happens anyway. But that center of the back can take a lot of heat, and you can start to get that burn very quickly. It doesn't take a whole lot, and you start getting that pain that happens from the bottom and experiencing that sensation that is very gratifying for a top.
Yeah, and I think that there are other ways to create the burn, and I think we chatted briefly about them. I just want to say to my listeners, this is definitely not your 101 stuff. This is definitely not something that's done without considering the risks, being aware of the risks, taking personal responsibility for the fact that you are accepting these things are going to happen before you get involved with this play. But I don't want to make this a safety. I'm very excited to talk to you, so I don't want to really make this about safety tonight. I'd like to talk a little bit about other ways that you can burn people, because you have a bit of an arsenal in this, and you do a lot with burning things.
Yes.
So maybe we can talk more about how you burn things and what that looks like for you.
For sure. So yes, I do just about every type of fire that there is. But one of the things that if we're going for a permanent pretty burn is what I would call it. A permanent pretty burn. I actually do branding. which a lot of people think of with branding. They think of, branding livestock. And we've also branded humans in the past, as far as, for slavery and everything, slavery, theft, all sorts of different criminal activities, those type of things. In the last, I would probably say 15 to 20 years, at least in the States, skin art is become a thing. Scarification as an art form, very kind of treated to where it's more like a tattoo is the idea behind it. And so I actually do artistic brandings on people. Very pretty things, doves, all sorts of really nice things. But yeah, it's basically taking a cautery pen that is used in surgeries to cauterize wounds and drawing on the skin in a beautiful way. And it's a legit burn, but it's a pretty brand. That's one of my favorite things to do and teach on it.
How long does that last?
Depends on the person. Most of the time, so there's like 3 different types of it, or I guess 4, technically 4. You have what's called cell popping or devil's fire, and that is taking a probe like Americans would use in biology class whenever they're dissecting a frog. It's basically just a metal poker. It's a very minor metal poker about the size of a small screwdriver. And you superheat that, and then you lightly touch the skin in a pattern. And what ends up happening is you're superheating the skin cells to where it basically pops. Okay. It's a micro brand, right? Those typically, I would say, maybe last 3 to 6 months. They don't last very long at all. Then there is what I do, cautery branding, which is superheated metal that is actually put into the skin and traced very similar to tattooing as far as the process of, following lines, that type of thing, using stencils, all of that. That can last depending on how often you do it, or your body composition, as far as like if you happen to be a person of color, the amount of melanin that you have in your skin. Also, if you're natives it doesn't last nearly as long. If you're a pale white person like me, it can last forever. It can last for several years. And then there's strike branding, which is the one that people think of whenever they hear of branding, which is where there's already a design that's pre-cut and pre-placed, and it's placed in a fire, it's superheated, and then it's pressed into the skin. Those are permanent. Those are absolutely permanent. There's no way to really remove those, depending on how deep you go.
I've seen that once. It had nothing to do with kink. It was in our sort of cow country up in the Midlands, and the farmers were all super drunk at about 3 a.m. in the pub on a Saturday morning, and they were all daring each other after far too much whiskey, and they had all these guys in their like really big puffer jackets and their shorts and their long socks, and they were pulling down their trousers and branding each other with cattle brands. And so the cattle brands, and there was just these like really loud screams from these slightly drunk and then very sober guys. It's also a fantastic way to get sober, by the way. I watched that about 11 people sober themselves up in about 30 seconds. They were much more sober after the brand. So I've seen it done like that, but I've never seen it done in a kink environment.
In environments, we are very particular about that, especially here in the States. I don't think I've ever actually seen we call that strike branding, is what we call that. I don't think I've ever seen a class done on that. And the reason for that, if you are doing a strike brand, there's a lot of rules with it that are for medical safety reasons. No closed design. So basically nothing that ends up in a circle. The reason that you want to avoid that is because if you go too deep, because generally those type of strike brands go past the dermis. You're getting sometimes muscle, especially if you're pressing. Okay, you're absolutely going to if you're pressing on it, like you're actually providing resistance into the skin. If it's a closed design, you can end up with basically that entire inside section turning gangrenous and necrotic and really, really bad.
Nice. The gift that keeps on giving. Oh, sweet.
Yeah, really, really, really not good. So generally what people have done, what I've seen people do, and that kind of goes into that fourth idea of branding, is actually doing cold branding. And people do cold strike branding, which basically using dry ice, or if you can get it, liquid nitrogen, that super cools a piece of metal, and then it's placed on the skin. It's not pressed into the skin or anything like that. It's just placed onto the skin and basically giving you frostbite. Or serious frostbite, and causing a branding type aspect. To me, I don't like the cold at all. There's a reason I live in Texas. It's warm here. It's cold. So that hurts to me more than the hot brands, more than hot branding. But it's safer to get that type of aspect, the strike branding versus the
I think I read a story on Fate Life, because Fate Life is a bit like Facebook. I'm sure everything that I read is 100% true, but somebody had done I read it on Facebook, so it must be true. I think I read a story about somebody who had a brand line burnt the entire way around the ankle. And closed, and then that was also really dangerous because the skin below the brand, then the healing wasn't great, and it ended up being quite serious. So I definitely second what you were saying earlier, because I've read it on Fate Life. It must be true. But I definitely second what you said earlier about not closing the brand. I think even they did the entire way around the ankle, and because they'd gone too deep, the whole bottom section got infected, and they had serious consequences from that, and ended up in hospital. And it turned out to be something that wasn't as fun as they had expected it to be. So I definitely have read that. The farmers I saw all survived, but I think they had enough straw rum in them to survive an apocalypse. So I think they would have been fine either way.
Yeah, closing off brands. I've never considered it from that aspect of like closing off appendages is basically how I would view that. You're basically creating a tourniquet type effect. Yeah. For as far as the circulation of the skin, for sure, that I could definitely see that being a problem if you were to go completely around a appendage with a brand, and if you do it too deep, there's no blood flow through those minor vessels at the top of the skin. That could absolutely be a problem for sure. I never really considered that, but yeah, that would be a big concern. Yeah, I would avoid doing that.
Yeah, and don't get drunk in a South African pub at 3:00 in the morning in the farmlands either. It's also super dangerous.
Don't drink and play.
Yeah, no, we don't. I have a zero substance tolerance policy for kink. My example of the story is just a very bad example. Please, listeners, do not follow any of this. Do not do this at home. It's not advised. You're talking about the cell popping or the micro branding. I do hand poke tattooing, so we use a single needle with ink, and we do blood lining a little bit with that. Could I use a something similar to that for a cell popping, or the needle's super fine? Is that needle going to be too fine for cell popping?
I would be very concerned with if you're doing a needle for that. So I do tattooing as well. So I understand what you're talking about as far as using single digit needles. You're using very fine tattooing. I'm familiar with that. That needle is going to be very, very tiny in comparison to what I'm talking about with a probe.
Okay, so you want something with a bigger end and almost blunter, so that you're getting more surface area.
Correct. You do kind of want a fine tip, but not a needle point. Okay. I think of like a as far as size, I would almost go with like a knitting needle. All right. So a knitting needle,
that's super helpful.
It's bigger, right?
Yeah.
It's bigger than like an actual needle, a blood needle. We call them probes in the United States. I can send you a link for what we would use here, and y'all may have a different name for them. But they're basically just a little piece of wood with a piece of metal that's sticking out the end. The wood is the handle, and it's a little piece of metal, and it's used to like probe around and dissected creatures is what they use.
I do have a dissecting needle in my kit, but I'm always keen to have more medical kit. Like it might just be a fetish of mine to collect random medical stuff and collect it and keep it in the dungeon and know that I have it. So I'm always keen to add to that collection. So I would love the link if you're happy to share, and then I'll also put that up in the show notes. So if the listeners want to have a look and see what Miss Kitten is now collecting in her medical kit, they can also do that, because they also might have a small medical fetish. I know this is a fire podcast, but I wanted to touch a little bit. You have a picture on your profile that most of the public can't see because you have to be friends. I'm super honored now that we are friends on FetLife, like that. It wouldn't let me be your friend to start, so I feel even more special now. But you have a couple of amazing blood play pictures. You have an angel that you've made. You didn't refer to it as an angel, but it looks like a blood angel. It's absolutely beautiful. Would you mind telling me a little bit about that scene? And it's really captivating. It's like bucket list.
For sure. So what that was with my ex, and what how this came about, like many relationships, I had asked her what's some fantasies, what's some fantasies that you want to have happen. And she mentioned she was very into blood. She kind of like that whole vampire culture type aspect. She was like, man, I just want to be able to like lay down in blood and do a blood angel like I'm in the snow. And I'm like, okay, I think I can make that happen. So I reached out to some of her friends, some of my friends. We had everybody tested for bloodborne pathogens, everything else. I got some heat for it whenever I first put this out for some other ideas on how to do this, but had some nurses, everybody else be like, you should not do this. So I'm going to put this out there. Don't do this unless you're doing a lot of research on how to do this before we continue with the story. We had her ex was a paramedic, so she actually came over and did blood draws on 3 people. We had 3.5 pints of human blood. We laid a plastic sheet on the ground, and then we laid a canvas on the ground, a very large canvas. She got naked and laid on there, and then we poured this blood onto her. And she then did the motion of a blood angel, and it kind of looks like a blood lobster to me, but we've called it the blood angel, and it was quite an experience. Took a lot of photos. She actually still has the piece. I think it's hung up in her room still. It was in our room when we were together for a while. It was something really cool that I don't think a lot of people have done, to use human blood that way, and make art with it, where it's all over her entire body. It was really, really cool.
No, the pictures are absolutely amazing. And I don't know if we might not have done it, but I'm telling you, a lot of us are thinking those things. I have my one question about the piece is, how long did the piece survive? Still got it?
Yeah, she still has it.
Oh,
yeah.
Wow. Okay, so it lasted a long time. Did you have to seal it with anything afterwards?
Yes, I did have to seal it afterwards because blood, whenever it first comes out of your veins, is very bright red. And then as it oxygenates and dries, it becomes gelatinous. And then it turns into like a brownish color. I think I actually do have a photo on my Fet that you can actually see what it looked like the most recent that I actually saw it. And it was more of a brown than a red. Okay. But yeah, you have to seal it. Blood does have a very distinct smell as well. That was something that was, we had to like leave it outside for a while. It was a little bit rough there for a minute. But yeah, and everything. It was pretty cool.
You talk about blood having a smell. The first time we ever did a very big blood spanking, and with more than one person, we actually had to open all the doors and windows in the house because the smell of iron can be quite overpowering, even if you play with it often. So there's definitely that, but it's something that is super hot. It's like the sound of fire, like the smell of blood, the sound of fire. Those are all things that tick the right boxes in my head. So I can just imagine 3.5 liters of blood definitely having a distinctive smell.
It was a lot. It was a lot. Exactly like you were talking about the sound of fire and that feel as it passes by you. That's part of what we love about it. That smell of blood like makes my mouth salivate. It's so wonderful. It's quite nice. And for those that don't know what the smell of blood is, if you could imagine the smell after, like, I'm sure most people have probably bit their tongue or had their mouth bleed, and you kind of have that coppery type taste. Imagine the smell associated with that. It's very similar.
Yeah, it's very irony. It's quite strong and it's quite potent. It's quite primal. I think both fire and blood are primal on so many levels, and I think that's why I personally connect with them. But
Me too.
yeah, I think it's also a bit of the taboo of both of them. Like, don't play with fire. I think that's like ingrained in us, especially growing up on a farm. Like, you just like, fire is like a no. You do not set things on fire. So of course you set things on fire. You go behind the shed and you set everything behind the shed on fire for most of your childhood career because it's something that you're not meant to be doing. Yeah, it's one of those total no-nos. So what's next in your fire journey? What are you looking to do? What do you still aspire to do? What's still on your bucket list?
So I've actually done a lot with fire. Something that I do, I've only gotten to do it a couple of times. I call it a fire blanket. And it's, for all intents and purposes, you've probably seen stuntmen on TV being fully engulfed in flames, wearing like the full flame retardant suit. It's kind of like that, but it's a tabletop version, using basically a blanket that I light on fire and lay on people. It's quite a show. It's quite a show. It's big fire. It's pretty intense. It takes a lot of prep, but it's really awesome. It's really awesome. It's a lot of fun. It's pretty much instantaneous subspace for some people. That's probably the things that I'm at. Yeah.
I've seen some of the proper stunt guys. There's an artist from France who's got one on Instagram where he got into a proper fire suit and they covered him in fire gel on his face, and it was 100% organized by a stunt team, so he was really well looked after. And then they doused him in fluid and then they set him alight and he ran around in flames. And the smile on his face, he's a total pyro, and just the smile on this guy's face, like, that is pure bliss. Like, it was just bliss from the moment they set him alight. And then he rolled on the ground. He didn't look super happy rolling on the ground. That looked a little bit like uncomfortable. And then afterwards he just sat there with this huge smile on his face, and I just smiled thinking about that and thinking about how happy that moment made him and how much joy it brought him. So I can just imagine this bringing you just as much joy. Yeah.
The closest that I get currently, I don't. You've seen my FetLife profile picture. There's in that photo, my hand is on fire. I'm using what's called a UV glove. It's basically a Kevlar glove. That's the closest that I can get to like having my whole body on fire and enjoying that is doing the glove, because then I have that tactile freedom. I'm wearing a glove that's on fire. It's great, and my hands aren't burning. They're more steaming, so it takes a little bit, but for it to hurt. But that's about as close as I can get. But yeah, I would love to do like that. I would love to be in a full fire suit and get completely lit on fire and walk around in it. I think it'd be awesome.
Well, I hope that happens for you. And I've had an absolute amazing time speaking about blood and fire. Like, really exciting to be able to connect both of my favorite kinks in one podcast. Sorry, fire people, that I stole your fire space with some blood talk, but you got to keep the kitten happy too. I'm just really grateful to connect with you tonight and to have time to chat with a kinkster that has experience and is prepared to share it, and an educator that shares so openly. So much thanks and gratitude from my dungeon.
Absolutely. It's been wonderful talking with you. Been wonderful learning about the scene there in South Africa. That's absolutely amazing. Some of the things that you shared. I'm looking forward to communicating with you further in the future, and even working with Reign of Fire for what y'all wanted to do. I think that's going to be great. I'm super excited for y'all, and I think it's going to be great.
Yeah, we're super excited to have you and to connect with you. To all my Rain of Fire listeners, guys, if you don't have your tickets, I don't know what you're doing with your life. I really don't. Get your tickets. Just do the thing. If we still have an early bird special until Tuesday, so you still can get a discount. If you need a sponsorship, please reach out to our team. We have scholarships and sponsorships for the con available. We want you to have the education that we want the education to be available to all. Price shouldn't be a barrier for attendance. We have our on-demand starting on the 1st of July, which is really exciting. You'll be able to have access to a YouTube channel and download a whole lot of 101 classes, a whole lot of fire basics. We've all put a lot of time into recording some really cool stuff that you can jam pack before the con so that you have all the basics, so that when you listen to these amazing educators, you know what they're talking about, and you have time to prepare some questions. And we're just excited to see your fire pictures, to hear your fire stories, and to connect with you. And to all my listeners and this amazing human that chatted to me tonight, lots of love from Cape Town, and kitten kisses. And I hope you have a lit weekend.
Oh, nice one.